God, look how far I've come. I'm so grateful that I can see it this way now. This is just how this is, and that's okay. And there's all lessons in it, and I'm going to go home and enjoy the rest of my day. And there's something to be grateful for in that too.
Welcome to Transforming the Toddler Years, a Core 4 parenting podcast for conscious, cycle-breaking parents ready to turn toddler tantrums into teachable moments. Hi, I'm Cara Tyrrell, a lifetime lover of littles, mom to 2 grown and flown girls, and an early childhood educator. Through the show, I teach you my collaborative parenting methodology for nurturing your little human's mind, body, and spirit. Because how you connect and collaborate in the first 5 years is how you raise happy, healthy kids who grow into the best version of themselves and find true success in school and life. Welcome back, Toddler Tribe, to the show. I have an amazing guest for you today. Her name is Diane Manser, and she is a teacher, a longtime teacher who wrote a book called I Didn't Sign Up for This, One Classroom Teacher's Journey Through Emotional Fatigue to Personal Empowerment. This is a little longer than my typical guest episodes, but you'll see why once you get into it. She is just a genuinely tapped in human being who explains how her journey to reducing stress as a teacher, as a parent, as a partner, and just as a human is what led her to feeling like she can take on middle schoolers. You're going to learn so much in this episode about who you are and who you want to be, and maybe even how you can get there. Diane, welcome to the show. We're talking about teachers today, and you and I are both teachers. I'm just so excited to have a teacher perspective join me here on the show.
Thank you so much, Cara. I couldn't wait to be on your show. Thank you for having me. Happy New Year to you. And when we got this organized a little while ago, I was just like, what a great way to kick off the new year is to be with you on your show and all your listeners and your viewers. So thank you for having me. And yeah, it's great to see you and to meet you online here as we talk today.
Isn't it wild how that happens? And we were connected by a mutual friend who basically absorbed my energy a long time ago and then absorbed your energy more recently and went, whoa, you two energies, you vibe.
Yeah, that's kind of how she wrote the email too. It made me feel really good. And it's so neat when those things occur. And then in this whole project that I've been in, how many wonderful, inspiring people I've met like you and have gotten to follow and learn about. So yeah, that I agree. That's been really cool. And now here we are getting a chance to finally sit together and talk.
Yes. So everybody knows my story about teaching young humans and identifying the fact that people were prioritizing what they knew, their cognition, over how they humanly interacted with themselves and other people. Tell us your story about why teaching feels like such an emotional journey to you and why you're just wanting to shout it from the rooftops.
Yeah, thank you. So I started teaching in 2006. I actually was able to get a job out of college, which is much, much, much more difficult today. And when I started teaching, I really did think that it was primarily about what are you teaching? Why are you teaching it? How are you teaching it? And then how are you ensuring that your students get it? I also, and I'm wondering if this happened to you as well, but I also thought that the students I was teaching were going to resemble a lot of how I was as a student. So once I started in the profession, you don't have that nurturing atmosphere of student teaching anymore. You are the sole teacher in that classroom, class after class, day after day. I didn't have the language. I didn't have the vocabulary at that time when I was that young in the profession, but I definitely recognized early on that the stresses and also the triumphs, that I was having in the classroom weren't so much content related. It was more of this emotional journey that I was going on. Like there were some situations that could make me feel really inferior, very self-doubting, overwhelmed and stressed, or even kind of fearful. Like if I wasn't keeping up with my work or I wasn't doing a good job with my grades, someone was going to question me, or someone was going to like watch me in a bad lesson, and then they were going to like, give me a talking to, or I was going to get sort of like in trouble in a way. Like all these fears kind of crept up. And some of them, of course, we recognize that can be true. Some of it's just what our minds do to us. Like we just get afraid when we don't have enough trust in what we're doing. We get afraid we don't have enough practice in what we're doing. And then those fears were making me overwork. They were making me feel a lot of overwhelm and stress. And that wasn't at all what I thought the profession was going to be like. The way I kind of dreamed it in my mind wasn't really the reality of what I was experiencing in my day to day. So after many years of that, and then finally getting a chance to see that something had to give in order for me to stay joyful and confident in the profession, I actually sought the help of a mental health professional. And that person was able to not so much give me the language, but kind of opened a lot of doors for me of self-exploration, which helped me to recognize that, oh my God, we are actually in an emotional profession. We're not at all strictly in a transactional profession. And if we could all hear this and learn from it and learn about ourselves through it, then we'll be much stronger and more empowered going through our school days than not having that language at all. And that's just a little bit of my story, journeying to where I am now.
Wow. I mean, I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking about how, each of us frames things a certain way. And, when I speak to parents, I talk about parenting being the personal development journey that you never knew you were going to take. Mm-hmm. And, when CEOs get hired, that's that next level development journey that they go on to get to their best selves. And you're telling us, and I mean, I can so relate, although quite honestly, no one's ever really framed it that way before, that in order to inspire students to truly do the learning, you have to model that emotional journey that you're on together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you're saying too with the parenting, because I think we've all been here where some of those frustrations we can have as parents or worries or doubts and fears, they can make us feel like we're at a level 8 or 10 stress. Yeah. And really the problem is like a level 2 problem. And you're kind of like, why am I at this like level 8 frustration or fear or worry when really looking in front of me here, this is pretty simple, or like I can kind of figure this out. But we get so caught up in it. And I think what we have to do too is recognize like, what am I doing this for? What is the purpose of what's in front of me? And then how can I keep pulling myself back to that point and not get too caught up in all the other details? And I agree with you for teaching as well. It is the greatest personal growth journey that anyone will go on. Like if you're looking to be a person who wants to serve others and grow your soul and grow yourself, then I don't think there's any position, any job out there that will do that more for you than teaching. And then you got parenting and teaching, which align perfectly in those two ways, doing the same thing, where you're recognizing so much of what you're experiencing is just mirroring back, the things that you have to work on. And that's, in this whole journey, I've written a book about the emotional challenges of teaching. And the theme of my book is that if we can do the work, the introspective work, and understand what some of our triggers are, what some of our kind of like shadows or hot spots are of stress, then we can see that's what I'm experiencing as a parent. That's what I'm experiencing as a teacher. And if I can see it for what it is and then move the stress a certain way or work that problem a certain way, it no longer has the big weight that it did when we just are sort of going through it at a high emotional level. Mm-hmm. And we're not regulating ourselves. We're not pulling ourselves back to centered. We're just constantly reacting. Or we might even be blaming, this has nothing to do with me. That's this person's problem or that person's problem, or my child did this, that person's problem. And really it's like all of that stress has its way of being like, no, it's really meant for us to work through and to figure out how we can improve and how we can grow and then recenter ourselves. And that makes the problem get a lot softer.
So everything is an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. That's how I see it.
That's what I hear you saying. And so, okay, I don't know if you've ever done this on a show before, but I'm going to go rogue. I know
Great.
you have a few high level takeaways from the book that you want to share with us today. So I'm going to rewind time.
Oh, sure.
Didn't realize I was magical, did you? Um,
No, actually, I did
I'm going to bring us back to 2007.
that.
Okay. So you're going to use your current awareness, introspective level knowledge, and talk to me back in 2007 when I was teaching preschool and had preschooler at home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would go to school every day and I would show up with all of me intact and I'd give it all away all day long to other people's kids. I'd give it all away at pickup to parents who needed me to love and support them through the transition. And I'd come home and I'd have very little left for my kids. So I would love to hear your big ahas, how you walk through that struggle bus like I was on, and how you coach other people to do that in those moments where you just feel like you got nothing left.
Yeah. Even hearing that story, I was there myself too. So when I had my children, they were little and you're going to school and you're teaching all day and you really are giving so much of the best of yourself in that school day. And then when you start to realize like you're coming home and you're just like at an empty tank, but you're trying to be something you want to be and how draining that is. And then it's just like inevitable that the stress is going to mount, the frustration is going to mount. You're going to feel eroded. And like, even just having you walk back to that time, it's like, man, if sometimes you're like, if I could do that again with all the information I have now, how different I would be. But it's all in its own way. And the whole point of this is to like share, validate, and then hopefully improve somebody else's situation. But the first thing that I would do, talking to someone who's in the situation would be to, one, recognize that not everything that we're experiencing is in our control. So as teachers, we're positioned to be in charge, but we're not in full control. And if we have a situation in front of us where maybe we have a parent who needs to lean on us a little bit more, or a child who is just having a difficult time getting used to the school environment, what I try to do is I remind myself that I am one part of this huge percentage process. So I'll remind myself like, hey, Diane, like you are a 9th grade English teacher, or in your case, Cara, you're teaching our early childhood development, and you're one percentage in this. And this parent who might be feeling stress, well, they're new at parenting. We were all new at parenting at some point. They're feeling worried. They're feeling stressed. And sometimes just being able to listen to that stress is enough for us to give that person something, or for us to be able to say, hey, by the time January comes with this child, my goal is that we're going to move this situation 10% better in this regard, not 100% better. And I think sometimes we take on such big weights as teachers because we're trying to move all the bigger situations so far down the timeline. And we want to be the best we can at our jobs. We want people to feel good about us as their child's teacher. And then we come home and we're like, I gave all that patience. I gave all that regard to all those other families, and I have nothing left for my own family, and they're important too, or even for my own self. So one of the first things that I've learned in this process is that we're positioned to be in charge, but we're not in complete control. So like, what can I do in my influence of control while I'm in my school day? And what do I need to take on? And what do I need to observe, but not absorb? So if I have a frequent situation that's happening, how can I say, yeah, that situation's happening in my space. There's a reality to that. I can't deny the reality of what it is. It doesn't mean that I have to get impatient. I don't have to get angry. I don't have to overwork. All I have to do is try to move this in a positive place. And that might be 10% better. It might be 60% better. But to put that pressure on and say, oh, I'm going to be this person who makes this completely better, I think that's where people who love and who nurture, who caretakers, can really outperform their job. And that can create a lot of the stress. So that would be one piece of advice that I've learned in all this work, is that idea of like control. Being in charge does not mean that we're in control. And how can we observe what's happening without absorbing so much of what's happening, to kind of keep protecting our energy and our space. And I think, some days are a little easier. Some situations are easier than others. But if we're typically coming home every single day, by 4 p.m. and we're just depleted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe we start finding ourselves coming home just 1 day a week, 2 days a week, really tired. And that could be a Thursday, Friday, because it's at the end of the week. But isn't that a whole lot better than Monday through Friday coming home tired? Or by Sunday at 5 p.m., we're dreading the Monday morning. Like all those improvements matter. And I think it's being willing to mindset shift what our energy is looking like, why it's looking that way, and where can we pull our power back.
Okay, so walking into this, I knew this was going to be a powerful conversation, and I knew I was going to learn something. I didn't realize by this timestamp my mind would be blown. I am 100%, with your permission, walking away with a new mantra. I am allowed to observe this. I am not allowed to absorb this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So powerful, everybody. And listen to how you can apply it, right? We're talking about the high stress situation that you have in a classroom or with coworkers or a staff meeting or all those other things that level up on us as teachers. You can apply this to parenting. You can apply this at your job, whatever that is. This is a human reset sentence. I love this.
Yeah, thank you. I like it too. It helps too. For me, very visual. And one of the things I learned in the therapy sessions I was in, the therapist said to me at one point, I want you to think about what a empowered woman looks like. It could be someone it could be someone who's a celebrity. And I just had this picture of almost like the Wonder Woman power pose is kind of what I had in my mind, and not really any sort of face. It was almost more like animated, cartoonish, but that's what I saw. But the observe, don't absorb, I almost see like, it's not a wall where I'm now like dismissive, I don't care, because I'm overly hopeful and optimistic and joyful. So I choose to say, I always have influence. It doesn't mean I have full control. Yeah. So that helps me to kind of put a little barrier up. Just the other day, I had a student who was making some not good choices in class. And I walked up to the student and I said to myself, don't forget, Diane, you observe, you don't absorb. So I was like, I can't control how the student's going to act in my class. And of course, it was causing me stress. But I was like, I cannot control this person's behavior. So I did what a lot of us learn as we go through these processes. I went up to the student and I said, I need you to be mindful of what you're doing and the stress that it's causing. And these are the decisions that you're making. You're choosing these decisions. And I said, you now have 2 choices in my classroom. And I outlined the 2 choices. And I said, you choose what you would like, and then I will respond appropriately. And the whole time I kept myself like cool, I kept myself composed, took that deep breath. And then just really from having the conversation, I think the student realized he was stepping out of line and was like, I understand, I'm going to choose this one. And I said, okay, thank you very much. And in the future, I would appreciate if we just didn't have to have this conversation. That would be the best. And he was like, understood. And then I walked away. And I have to say, I always walk away from these situations like, good job. Well done. But I'm also a little shaky. Like, I'm not like naturally very confrontational. I'm not naturally the person who's going to be like telling people how it is from the get-go. So it takes me a little while to like build up that strength and courage. But I also know that sometimes we have to be the teacher and the parent we have to be, not who we want to be. And that matters too. Like, who do we have to be? Who do we got to be versus who we want to be? And sometimes we have to be willing to pull that out when we need to give a firm no, or we have to say, look, I love you too much, or I love this space too much. I love my home too much. I love what I'm trying to do as a parent too much. I love myself as a teacher too much. I love my classroom too much to allow it to go sideways when I'm fully aware of how this is going to go. I love it too much to allow that. So I just wouldn't allow it.
Wow.
And I think using some of that language can be really helpful, especially when we're faced with a lot of stress, or like you had brought up colleagues, like we can't control our colleagues.
No.
And the most we can do is influence. I've had a lot of people who are like, you're always so happy, and that annoys me. And I'm like, well, okay, that's fine. But then you find people who are like you, those are your closest friends and your closest colleagues, and you can still have a very high quality, high demeanor, professional relationship with everyone else. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you have to have any kind of conflict or any kind of bad situation. It's just like, clearly we're more in alignment over here, less over here. that's not really a problem, is it? It's just the way it is. So again, that idea of observe, don't absorb really helps me in those regards.
As a thank you for being a loyal listener to the show, I have a gift for you. Just click the link in the show notes and grab my new intentional language tool. 5 things your toddler needs to hear you say every day. Start incorporating them now into your daily exchanges and watch and listen as your child responds differently to you. One of the things that I say all the time to parents, particularly, is you are not in charge of your child's choices. Your children are in charge of their choices. And very often I'm met with a jaw drop or a shock face. And they're like, but I'm in charge. Like, I'm the adult. Aren't I supposed to? And I try to gently explain that all of those are power moves. All of those create power struggle. And what you did is, 1, you instinctively understand that. 2, you approached this student with a conversation, not like you transferred ownership of choice. Mm-hmm. And that is so important, right? You used your mindset shifts. You empowered yourself to be ready to have the conversation, but you didn't go over and say, this is how it is in my classroom, right? That's a power move. Mm-hmm. You said, we can figure this out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think when we have young children, it's easy for us to be like, well, if I just let them do whatever they want, then they would only blank, blank, and blank, you know? And I think that's, you know, just being a little bit extreme to the philosophy, because sure, in classrooms too, well, if I let my students do whatever they wanted, then of course, you know, 14, 15-year-old students would only, you know, will mostly choose the things that wouldn't actually give them a good education. But the idea being where we constantly have those conversations. So we say to our children, like, these are your choices. So you want this thing. I can tell this is very important to you. Because it's important to you, it is important to me. But we have to be sure that we're adhering to that together, because we're in a community here, you know, in our house or in our classroom. So how can we make this work for both of us, where you feel like you're getting what you need, but I also know that I'm getting what I need? I have a student who sometimes needs a break, but I went through a couple cycles where they would take an extended break outside of the classroom. So that didn't make me comfortable, because I was like, we had agreed to like 3 minutes, 4 minutes of a break. You're extending it to 8 minutes. That's too long. I don't know what's happening out there, and I can't have that stress in my mind while I'm trying to teach. So I said, if you want to have your break, which is important to you, I know that it's important to me, it's important to you, you can have your break within the classroom walls. So choose where you're going to go, take your break, 3 minutes, and then you just rejoin the class session. And that helped, in a way. Again, it's all this negotiations, all these conversations, but it's a way of being like, there's choice here, but I'm respecting you, but I also have to make sure I'm respecting myself within whatever is coming up. And I think, when I started my teaching career, I actually have it outlined in my book. My very first day of school, I got into a power struggle with a student. It was actually in the first 5 minutes of my teaching career. And it was a painful situation. And I couldn't even believe that I did it, because I had never before confronted anyone like that. But I had my teacher beliefs were challenged. I assumed that someone was going to listen to me because I was the teacher and I told them to do something. I wasn't ready for noncompliance. Mm-hmm. And when I was hit with the noncompliance, I reacted because I wasn't prepared for it. And I felt insecure, and I felt like this person was kind of, pushing me to respond. So I did. And I got into a power struggle with the student. And it was like years and years later that I was like, oh, I know why I did that, because I thought that I walked into it not even expecting the problem. And then I thought that respect meant you listen to the teacher. And that's not everyone's mantra and definition of respect. So I have a whole thing outlined in the book, but I learned such a heavy, important lesson from that very first day of school that 20 years later, I haven't forgotten, but I never did repeat again, because you learn these lessons and then you figure it out. You know, what works for you. You start taking things from other people. But it wasn't until years later that I was like, oh, that's why I did that. And that's why it felt so bad. And now I know what I would do differently.
Wow. Well, I mean, you just touched on probably the most important part here, which is that teachers and students, parents and kids, partners, coworkers have successful experiences, and everybody learns when they are in a healthy relationship. Mm-hmm. So really, as a teacher who's tapped into the idea that this is an emotional job and it's emotion work, mm-hmm. you are cultivating uniquely different personalized relationships with every student that comes through your door. And I promise you, whether or not they say it out loud because they're teenagers, they respect you for that. Therefore, their ears are more open than most to what you're teaching, and they're probably retaining far more than they do in other classrooms.
Yeah, possibly. Or I've noticed over the years when you don't get into those power struggles, you're more willing to have those conversations and to express like, you know, this doesn't make me feel comfortable, or I'll use language like that didn't feel right. Like that's really nice. The soft approach to be like, that didn't really feel right. Or I'll ask one of the questions I love to ask my students is, I might say something to them like, hey, this thing happened. That didn't really feel right to me. What's the hardest part for you in here? Is there something that's really hard for you in here that if you could share with me, I would have a little bit more understanding to? And sometimes they're like, yeah, the hardest part is, and then sometimes it has to do with you as the teacher, but I'll tell you, most of the time it doesn't. Like you're taking on these stories that they're personal to you. Like, you know, your young child looks at you and screams they hate you, or your young child looks at you after you've just given them an amazing birthday party, but they're upset because you didn't get to go ride bikes that day. And you're like, are you kidding me? Like, I just threw you a birthday party and you're upset about we didn't get to ride bikes? Like, it's just because those things, I try to remind myself, those things are important to those kids. So it's like, okay, you didn't get to ride bikes. That sounds very important to you. We had your birthday party today. I need to know what you liked about your party. Okay. And then maybe we can ride bikes tomorrow. But it's constantly just trying to remove yourself from the emotions that other people are pulling you into, because they're training you and likewise you're training them. That's kind of what keeps happening. So I'll ask students, I'll say, that didn't really feel right to me. What do you think about that? How can we come to a better situation here? Or what's a hard part for you in this class or this environment? And sometimes it's, I don't like the person who sits across the aisle because in 7th grade, they blank, blank, and blank. And you're like, oh, that's why you're so defensive in here. Or that's why you are doing whatever in here. Okay. And you start to come to learn about it. But that's all because it's emotion work. Like you've said, it's not transactional. It's not me standing in front of, a whiteboard and writing notes while students write the notes. They transfer to an essay, they hand it in, they leave. Like that's not the classrooms we have today. And it's not how our children are being born into a society today. It's right. All quite upgraded, wouldn't you say? Like yes. The whole system's been upgraded over the last 30 to 45 years. So it's not a transactional process, parenting or teaching to children or to students. It's very emotional in both regards.
Yes, you're so right. I was on a show earlier today and we were having this conversation about how quickly the swing has happened in the perspective that parents and teachers have towards children. And the generational gap is not that big, right? My parents definitely have a completely different view of how we engage with people who are younger than us than my aunts do and my uncles do. Like it's really wild to me how quickly it's happened. But you're right. We're seeing an incredible shift that humanity is now at the core of connection and interaction, whether that be with someone you just met at church or the new human you brought into the world. And I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that too. And I think it means we have to be willing to accept that the things or the methods that we experienced that maybe worked for us, or maybe we were just willing to kind of tolerate, may not be the same methods that work for others as well. Like sometimes when we have conversations with our children or our students, and they are conversations, and you're trying to come to an understanding between the two people, others might say, well, you just need to tell them to do this. And it's like, sure. And that child then has a choice. They could listen to you and they could respond because they don't want to go against authority, or they're just going to do as they're told.
Yeah.
But is that system going to work the next 20 times, the next 30 times? Like, I kind of go, probably not. Like, if I want to tell a student that's just how it is in here, and it's September, that student might comply with me in September, but I don't think that's going to work in October. And I had that student from October through, whatever, a semester or through a whole school year. So it's sometimes we have to look at it like this is a long game strategy. I have a 2-year-old who might be a little defiant, and that's very stressful to me. Well, why is that stressful to me? Maybe you were the child who was not allowed to be defiant. Maybe you were the child who couldn't go out of turn for whatever reason. So you just accepted this role of listening and being good and following rules. And you don't like this child is now not doing that same thing. But really, deep down, you didn't like that either. Like, there's something that child is kind of screaming at you. There's some sort of like, something I have in my book that I've learned is that behavior is communication. And that means from our children, our students, and from ourselves too.
Yes.
Like, our behavior is communicating something. And I think there's something to that we have to be willing to review and to consider. Maybe there's a different method that has to go here because their behavior is showing me something else.
I love this. I'm also actually currently writing a book, and it's about how to talk to kids before they talk back. And so it's the linguistic side, the literal language we use and how they process it in their brains before they get to the multi-step process of making a choice, because we define listening differently than they do. For us, listening means they did what we told them to do. It's the action, but that's not actual listening. They hear us, they process us. So yeah, I'm mapping that out very clearly, so people can kind of see it differently. And it's for teachers. So when the teachers can see it differently, they can reframe like you're talking about here, right? So you had 3 huge takeaways for us, and I just want to rip them off one after another so people can sit inside them, maybe even replay this section a few times right before you have one of those challenging days or afterwards. All right, so we want to be able to identify the control trap. We're not always in control. It's not our job to think we are. We need to own some mindset shifts and have personalized methods that empower us to be in that moment without holding all the extra stress. And the one thing we didn't really get to dive into is the purpose of gratitude and joy. And you've alluded a couple times to that you're just a kind of a bubbly, happy person. And those are the people we are drawn to. So does this just come naturally to you? Is this just who you are? Or is it a persona that you've allowed yourself to step into because you know it's part of your de-stress program?
Yeah, I think I've always been very positive, happy, content in simple ways. Even as a young kid, I can think back to a lot of things that I just didn't really have a critical nature. I guess I'll put it that way. But as an adult, though, especially early in my teaching years, I did start to hold that positivity as a shield in front of me. And that was a huge mistake. I didn't realize I was making the mistake until I sought that help and then did a lot of introspective personal work. But I started to hold that, be grateful for things, don't complain about things, be positive. It could be a lot worse. I started to hold that as a shield. And then therefore, I never was allowing myself to admit or to share or show that this downright sucks, or this is hard. And then I just didn't want to go there because I was like going to this negative place. It really wasn't even negative. It's more just realistic. Was so uncomfortable for me that I didn't really know how I would react or how other people would react. So I kind of kept it to myself. That was a huge mistake. So I've done a much, much healthier job in recent years of being able to say, I see the reality of this. I don't like it. and I better figure something else out or I'm going down a bad path. And I don't want that to happen to myself. And that's where I'll initiate some conversations. I'll put some boundaries in. I'll communicate with the people who are causing me stress. And I'll at least be able to say, I don't even know if you realize you're doing this, but now you do. Now I'm going to make it very clear. We're just going to have a conversation. I'm not angry. It happens. But we have to reset ourselves. And if we don't, then this is only going to get more tense, and nobody wants that. So those will be the decisions that I make now, whereas years ago, I wouldn't do that. I would just kind of smile and, happy my way through it. And, but that wasn't serving me, and it definitely wasn't serving the people I was with, whether it be my husband, my kids, my students, it just, not being honest with yourself in that way doesn't serve either. But yeah, the idea of the gratitude though does help me, especially when I realize there's something that I'm not going to be able to make much better.
Yeah.
This is the situation. This is how it is. And then I'll just find the things that I'm grateful for. Or I realize, hey, 10 years ago, this would have bothered me when I was making dinner. And now I can look at it and say, oh God, look how far I've come. I'm so grateful that I can see it this way now. This is just how this is. And that's okay. And there's all lessons in it. And I'm going to go home and enjoy the rest of my day. And there's something to be grateful for in that too.
You are the exact right person for me to ask this final question to, and not everybody fits that mold. So my husband and I, for years and years and years, probably maybe like 15 or 20 now, we've been on this personal development journey individually and together. We try to consume the same books. We try to absorb the same info. Of course, it processes differently in both of us. I have a brain that moves really fast. So I'm usually a few steps ahead, and I've been so guilty many times of getting frustrated with the people around me. I'm using him as an example, and he's okay with that. He knows I throw him under the bus sometimes on the show. And being like, listen, can't you keep up? Look at all the hard work that I'm doing to make sure I don't feel in control all the time, and to work my mindset and do my gratitudes and next level my understanding of this whole thing called humanity and connection. Keep up. Mm-hmm. And then I have expectations that I cannot possibly see come to fruition. And when my expectations don't match the reality, now I've put myself back in a tricky situation. So I just really feel like with your depth of wisdom, the work that you've done, the personal work you've done, the professional work you've done, you might have something to share, and maybe someone else needs to hear this today too.
Yeah, the expectation thing, I love everything that you said, and thank you for that, because I get in the same spot sometimes as well. That's what causes the stress, is when we have an expectation for something, it doesn't match our reality, or doesn't match the reality, and that's, to me, the space that's held in the middle of those two things is stress. And I think there's a lesson in all of that for me. When I get the same way, it's why, I'll go back to that behaviors communication. Why am I feeling annoyed and frustrated and stressed in this moment when I do know at my core, this person I'm angry with is trying to work with me? So is it because I'm becoming impatient? Or is it where I have to reset my expectations? Or maybe it's hey, I have to kind of circle back and pick that person up and kind of pull them with me a little faster. But again, I'll constantly look back at myself in that regard. Usually when I'm feeling angry or stressed, it's there's something, I realize that it can feel like it comes from outside of us, but really it's there's something that I'm not really doing. The holiday season this year really got to me, because the holidays are wild, as you know, so much pressure and things to do. And a couple of things shifted in our home lives, which gave me a lot less time to do things. And I was coming on December 22nd, and I just had a nuclear explosion, I was but really it was I didn't communicate well. I didn't take care of myself. I put way too much stress on myself. The way I saw some things happening didn't really go the way I wanted them to. And I knew it. I knew it was coming. I just wasn't willing to hit that break to reset it. And I think sometimes we have to do that. We have to stop where we are and be I might be a whole lap ahead I can either keep going ahead, which is only going to probably make me feel more frustrated. No one else is with me. I'm on this run by myself. Or I can stop, take a breath, and be like, I'm going to go back and just relearn a lesson a second time. What's the harm in that? As opposed to learning more, I'm going to go back and just, there was this thing that I didn't get the chance to really dive into. Now I'm going to go back and play with that a little bit more because I have some time. But then I would probably communicate with that person. I'm pausing myself. I need you to catch up to me, and then we're going to keep going together.
Yeah. Oh, so beautiful. All right. So listen up, everybody out there. Clearly, we have moved through the teaching space, the parenting space, the partnering space, at pretty much every space, the co-working space. So I think that everyone should go get your book, whether they are a teacher or not, because obviously these nuggets are in there and applicable to every part of their life. So tell us, Diane, how to get your book. What's it called? Yes. And I'll make sure the link is in the show notes.
Thank you. So the book is called I Didn't Sign Up for This, which is what we say when we're feeling stressed as parents and teachers. I didn't sign up for this. And then it's a personal empowerment story. So the full title is I Didn't Sign Up for This, One Classroom Teacher's Journey Through Emotional Fatigue to Personal Empowerment. It's tons of lessons I've learned along the way from teaching, parenting, from podcasts I've listened to, books that I've read, therapy that I've gone to, and they're all interwoven into story. So it's story after story, lesson after lesson examples. You can find it on Amazon. You could type it, I didn't sign up for this teacher book. You could also find it on my website, which is called teachingisemotional.com. And you could download a free sample of the book if you're interested to see if it's right for you, to see if the language feels good, the writing style feels good, table of contents, etc. So you can get a free sample if you'd like to. And then you can also purchase the book off the website as well. So I'm hoping your listeners and viewers will check it out, or maybe even do a book club. And I'm Diane Manser. And if anyone's doing a book club, please email me. It's Diane@teachingisemotional.com. I'd love to join you for a session virtually or in person, if I'm in the Philadelphia area. And I'd love to share this message and continue not only being able to express what I've learned, but every time I have these conversations, I learn from others too. So it's just this constant reciprocal process, and I just keep growing and getting stronger, which is the whole point. We get to share with others and learn for ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking your time today to share with us. And before I close, I just would like to give you one more compliment, because my first student teaching gig was in middle school, and it was the last time that I set foot in a middle school. And I said, wow, it takes a really special human to want to work on a daily basis with middle schoolers. Now, people tell me all the time that that's true about the early years too. But honestly, I just want to say thank you, because the middle schoolers that go through your classroom are very blessed to have someone to hold space for them during a very challenging, hormonally, emotionally defining time in their lives.
Thank you, Cara. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I do try to remind myself of that as a teacher. Like I try to love all those kids through whatever they're going through. And one of the neat things is being in a high school, I get to see them grow up. Because sometimes how they were in 9th grade, like you see them in 11th grade, 12th grade in the hallways or whatever. And they're like, they've just grown in such confidence and leadership. And you're like, yeah, they're going to change 1,000 different ways by the time they're done here. And for me to take what they're doing right now so personally is only going to make me not enjoy my day.
That's right.
I'm just going to choose to love them through it anyway. Yeah. Thank you so much, Cara. Thank you for letting me be on your show. Thanks to all your beautiful listeners for joining in the conversation. And I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Same. All right. So to all those beautiful listeners, I tell you all the time that if you set this foundation in the toddler years, you've already won the teenage years. So you're seeing the span here today. You're listening to it today. So if that's a journey you want to take, you can call out and ask for help. Until our next episode, for all of you amazing teachers and parents out there, stay mindful and proactive as we transform the toddler years.